Well, it is time for another hair punching video. The last one that I made, I believe, was about 11 or 12 years ago. So definitely time to revisit this topic. Now, this particular tutorial is a follow-up to a series I've been doing on making a silicone bust. So if you missed any of those videos, I will be linking those on the end screen, and actually a fourth video as well. There's the casting video, the seaming video, and of course the airbrush and painting video. And then also I'll link to the original hydrocal mold video where I made the mold for this head. Now, the first thing we need to cover is what all you need to do this process. I mean, obviously human hair and a hair punching tool and that sort of thing, but let's go through a quick list of what you're going to need to do realistic hair on a silicone bust. Now, for my bust, this is a female, so we're gonna do some false eyelashes on her. These you can pick up at most beauty supply shops, and really this part of the process is probably the easiest part because you can pick out eyelashes in literally just about any style, and they're super easy to install on your bust, as it were. Now, the other thing you're gonna need is silicone adhesive, and this silicone adhesive here, this is a Locktite clear silicone, and you can find this in the adhesive section of most hardware stores. And I found this works great for sticking hair to TC-5110 and TC-5130, and of course the fast versions of those as well. Now, I bring that up because in some instances I found that this sealant will stay sticky, and it's almost like it's kind of inhibited by some platinum silicone skin materials. So you want to be very careful about that. But the nice thing about the 5110 and 5130 is I found that this sticks beautifully to those, and this is very easy to obtain. So that's one of those things a lot of you have asked about is, hey, I want to do this, but I want to do it using supplies that are relatively easy to get. So this is one that's easy to get. Now, if you are using a silicone skin material that is wonky with the Loctite adhesive, you can use SAM32. And SAM32, this is higher end, this is more expensive, but this works for some of the other silicone skin materials where this might not work quite right. So just file that away. More expensive, but does work on some of the other skin materials. Now, the other thing we're going to need is, of course, human hair, and human hair is surprisingly easy to get at most beauty supply shops. This is some hair I got at a reduced price, as you can see there, from Sally's Beauty Supply. So it's sold based on the price, based on the length. So this is about 8-inch hair, and typically this is what I'd use for a male, average short-haired male. And typically one of these packages of hair is enough to do an average size head of hair. But just remember, it's based on, the price is based on the length of the hair. So if you're doing somebody with really long hair, that's going to cost a lot of money. A lot of those really long, like 15, 16-inch lengths of human hair get pretty expensive. Now, the other thing with the human hair, an important detail here, you'll see this is kind of a blend of different colors, and that's ideal. Of course, it all depends on the person that you're trying to mimic their hairstyle, but using the hair that's just all dyed one color looks a little flat and unrealistic. And ideally, when you're simulating real human hair, kind of like my beard, you see all the different colors of hair I have in my beard. To get that accurate organic look, sometimes you might have to buy a few different colors of hair and mix those to get a realistic looking hairstyle. Now, for tools that you're going to be using for this is a hair punching tool like this. And these hair punching tools are easy to make. This is basically a sewing needle put in point first into an X-Acto handle. And then you grind off the eye of the needle at a steep angle so that it's kind of like a little miniature fork with one prong longer than the other. And that longer prong is used to grab a single hair or a few hairs at a time, and then they get caught up in that, that little fork area, and then you can plunge that into the silicone, and the tension of the silicone closing around that as you pull out the needle is what holds that hair in place. And then, of course, we're also going to be using some scissors, just some good sharp scissors, and of course a dental spatula. You're going to use that for applying your silicone adhesive. And foam core board or cardboard is great as a palette for your silicone adhesive. So just having a little plastic or cardboard palette that you can put some silicone adhesive on and work from really helps a lot. Just makes that process a little bit easier as you're working with your silicone. Now, last but not least are these crown needles from Lars from makeupeffects.com. You can order these off his website, and they come in a little box of different size needles, and they're color-coded based on the amount of hair they're going to grab. And you can find these at some hobby stores as well, but Lars has done some incredible work by compiling a set of needles from everything from really coarse to really fine, and just very convenient to have them in a set like this. And then, of course, they're color-coded with tape. But basically, the way these work is, this is the biggest one, so this is probably going to be the most likely to show up on camera. But even there, I don't even think you can see the little slots in that needle. But the way these work is each one of these needles has little, along the needle, has little diagonal slots. So as you're shoving that through a clump of hair, it's grabbing multiple hairs at the same time and embedding those in the silicone. And these are great. They're not 100% necessary, but they're great if you're doing a lot of hair punching and you want to move fast. As you'll see here in a minute, these are a great way to punch a lot of hair quickly into silicone. Now, the way I typically approach a silicone head like this, and again, this is all depending on the character or the creature that you're doing, but typically if it's an average human head, for the bride at Biddy here, overall she's going to have a pretty average head of hair. Typically, I work from the base of the skull and the sides up, and then I leave about 2 inches or so worth of scalp in which to punch the hair for that last remaining part of the hairline. Now, obviously, this is one of those judgment calls you have to make on a case-by-case basis, depending on the character, the creature, whatever. But typically, the more realistic you want it, the more hair you're going to be punching. And typically, hand-laid hair like this, where we're gluing it onto the scalp, you can move with that fairly quick. So to start out, we're going to cut off a little chunk of hair off this strip of hair out of that package. And the smaller little chunk of hair that you work with, the more realistic your hair is going to be. So I'm going to take some silicone adhesive from my little palette here. And we're going to kind of butter that on and then feather that hair right into it. And back here on the back, it's not too critical how these roots look. So you don't have to be near as careful as you have to be with the front of the head. But here we can just put that, smear that right in, feather that out. And we just want to make sure that that silicone saturates all of that hair so it grabs it really good. So once that cures, everything is well bonded to that scalp. And at this point, while the silicone's wet, you can pull that apart a little bit and spread that out, or use your spatula to spread that out a little bit. And that way your hair doesn't wind up coming to a point of V shape. You want that to look more natural. And again, all of that is predicated on the hairstyle that you're going for and the finished character or creature that you're doing. So again, we're just going to dispense some more of that silicone adhesive. And just again, we're just layering this one layer on the next, just again like shingles. So just smear a little bit there and just press that in. And you want to keep that fairly thin, but again, make sure everything is saturated into that hair so it gets a good bond there. But I can't stress enough, this silicone works great for TC-5130F, but I did some tests with this on some other silicone, and this will stay tacky forever and doesn't quite cure right on some silicone skin material. So if you're not using Locktite and 5130F, make sure you do your own test to make sure everything's going to work for your process. Now, the way this works from here on out, we're just going to keep building that up in layers. Just again, like you're putting shingles on an old house. You're just going to put a little bit of hair, put that on with the dental spatula, feather that out, And you don't have to let that fully dry before you move on. If you're really careful and you're not pressing things around on it, you can go ahead and proceed and keep going up the top of the head. Now, if you're concerned about the hair sticking to the previous layer, and depending on the hairstyle you're doing, if you're working with really short hair, then you might need to use a hair dryer to kind of speed set some of that silicone adhesive. But that is an air drying silicone adhesive. So typically within a couple of hours, it'll have a pretty good bond. And overnight it'll cure completely, and everything will be ready to proceed to hair punching. So typically I build up all the hair that I'm gluing in a couple of days and then let that sit overnight and then start working on the hairline as I switch over to hair punching. Okay, now once we've gotten up to the point where about 2/3 or about 3/4 of the way up on the head, we're ready to transition from gluing the hair on to punching it in with a hair punching tool. And the main one that I use is my go-to tool is just an X-Acto handle with that sewing needle in the end of it. And typically when I'm making these tools, I'll make about 3 of these, a small, medium, and a large, and it's all based on the size of the eye of the needle. So you can get an assortment of sewing needles and a few different X-Acto handles and make yourself a few different tools like this. But basically the way this works is you grab a clump of hair and you fold that over your index finger like so. And then you're going to use that long prong to grab the hairs and punch that into the scalp. Now you see I got about 2 or 3 hairs there. And this is a little tricky to do for video as to how much is going to read on the video camera machine. Now it's really tempting when you're starting out to lay down a row of hair where the hairline is going to be and try to work back, and you don't want to do that. You want to start right up on the edge of where you've been gluing the hair and then work forward from that point. If you try to work forward and then come back, you wind up with a big mess, and then on top of that, the hairline looks very artificial. You'll find if you start at the back and work your way forwards, you will naturally start to see where the hairline goes, and especially if you put a line in the life cast where that's going to be. But also you just start to see the hairline forming, and you can start adjusting your colors of hair and everything as you get closer to that point. So you definitely don't want to play fill in the blanks and just make a line of hair and work back. That looks really unnatural. Now, the main thing when you're putting in hair with a needle like this is remember that this is very directional in the way the hair goes in. So if we punch this hair at a steep angle like this, that hair is going to come right back like that. So if you punch, whereas if you punch it straight down, it's going to stick straight up. So remember that if you're doing, when you're working on eyebrows, that if you don't want the eyebrows sticking straight out of the head, you have to poke that in at a very steep angle so that that hair lays back down against the scalp. And of course you can use hair gel and stuff like that. But just remember that much like the way hair grows, you want to punch your hair in at that same angle so that it will look natural. And this is one of those things too where as you're punching hair, you're going to be at all kinds of crazy angles to the head. So I typically hold the head in my lap if that's at all possible, because it's much easier to do the sides, especially the sideburns and the hair on the side of the heads is much easier than trying to do it standing up. So you just adjust that accordingly, move the head however you need to move it around to be able to accurately punch the hair and get realistic results. Now, the other thing you want to be mindful of when you're punching hair into the scalp is the length of the hair. When you're folding that over, if you're folding it, you're losing as much as half of the hair, sometimes about 1/3. So just remember that when you start going in to punch this hairline, this hair is going to be considerably shorter than that original length. So if you're working with an 8-inch clump of hair, then you're going to wind up with maybe 5 or 4 inches of hair sticking out. So remember that when you get up to the hairline, sometimes you might have to transition to a longer hair to make that all match. So that's the basic use of a traditional hair punching needle with a sewing needle embedded in an X-Acto handle. And for a lot of applications, in fact, this is how I punched hair exclusively right up until about 2009 when I discovered these needles from makeupeffects.com. So I'm just going to show really quickly, just with a couple of the needles here, what you can do with one of these needles, because this definitely speeds up the process. Now again, these needles, this is how they come, but you can obviously mount these in an X-Acto handle. But basically the way this works, and again, this is one of those things that's kind of tricky to do for a camera here, but as it passes the hair, it's going to grab hairs and embed those. So you do this a little bit differently. You're going to just grab it with maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches or so sticking out. And then again, remember that direction is really important. So you're just going to go in like that. And there you go. And obviously this is for very heavy hair punching that grabs a lot of hair at the same time. So you get a lot of coverage really fast. But I would not recommend this for the hairline. One other consideration while we're in the hair punching portion of this is when you're casting a silicone head like this, real important to remember that you're going to be punching a needle into the scalp repeatedly. And even though typically I do about 1/4 inch thick skin on most silicone heads, up towards the top of the head or any place where I know I'm going to be doing a lot of hair punching, I'll build that skin up a lot thicker. So as I'm putting that silicone into the mold, with that in mind, I'll typically make the scalp at least about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch thick of silicone, because that just allows that scalp to grab that silicone a lot better when you're punching. Now, some of you are probably wondering, with all that tedious hair implanting, why would you do that instead of just buy a wig? And hey, that's definitely the better way to go a lot of times. But when you're doing something like this, my reptilian head that many of you probably saw in our physical store that we used to have in Dallas, you might have seen the reptilian head, and this is a great example of where, yes, we could have used a wig, but that allowed me to punch that hair and make it nice right around where her reptilian skin is exposed. So things like that, and especially like with creatures, if you're making a werewolf, there's probably not going to be an appropriate hairpiece or pre-made wig for a creature. So that's where it really is helpful to learn to be proficient at implanting hair. Now, if the hairstyle of your creature or your silicone bust is conducive to using a wig, then I would definitely do that, because this wig I think cost about 60, 70 bucks or so, and it has a lace hairline, and these are super easy to apply because basically you just put down a thin layer of silicone across the scalp and press that in, glue it around the back, and you're done. So a hairstyle like this, again, if it fits your creation, then by all means do it, because hair punching and handling hair is a lot of work. And if you can cut that out by buying a wig, go for it. So there you have the process of putting hair onto a silicone bust. And I know this is one of those processes that's fairly involved. And again, it really just comes down to your skill level and your patience and how much work you want to put into a head like this, whether or not you want to go with a wig, whether that makes sense, or you want to do hand laid and punched hair. Again, those are all judgment calls that you get to make. So with that said, I tried to keep this video as concise as possible to make this as straightforward as humanly possible. So I hope you enjoyed it. And if you missed the previous videos on casting and seaming and airbrushing, definitely check those out on the end screen. I'll link all of those videos, as well as the video on the hydrocal mold that I did for molding the original sculpture. So again, be sure to check those out. And as always, the material links will be in the video description. And just remember, real important, this works great. This Locktite adhesive works great on 5110 and 5130, not so great on some of the other silicone skin materials out there. So when in doubt, run a test, make sure everything's going to work the way you want it to. and good luck with your silicone bust project. Now, as always, if you haven't, be sure to like and subscribe, and of course, share this video with your friends and loved ones, because who doesn't want to make a realistic silicone bust of their friends or family? And of course, thanks for watching and thanks for supporting the channel.